Hello everyone, my name is Jeroen and I'm here to present OrganiTE, an optimal transplant donor organ offering system using an individual treatment effect. This is work done collaboratively with James Jordan and Joanna Bika and the center's members Alexander Gimson and Michaela van der Schaar. So what is the problem that we try to solve with OrganiTE? Well, in principle, we wish to give an organ to a patient on a waiting list such that we maximize the total population life years. This is a very hard problem for several reasons. First, organs are unique, so you never see the same organ twice, and they have a high dimensional feature representation. These feature representations vary from donor BMI to donor age to donor gender, etc. Choosing a patient also means not choosing others. Some patients are sicker than other patients, so we need to, in some way to take into account how long will this patient live if we don't give them an organ versus what if we do give them an organ for everyone on the list. Organ allocation not only has a long-term effect on the patient, but also on the entire waiting list. So how is OrganiTE different than other assignment policies? Well, we argue that we take into account several different aspects of the transplant system at the same time. For instance, with OrganiTE, we take into account the months a patient has left to live without an organ, the gains from given a specific organ, and the probability of receiving a very similar organ in the future. This contrasts other assignment policies, such as a best match policy that only takes into account the features of the organ and the patient, an incremental survival policy that only takes into account the gains of the organ versus how long they have to live, and a sickest person first policy that only takes into account how long the patient has to live without an organ. So what does OrganiTE do specifically? Well, we balance three main aspects. The first aspect is the match with respect to the patient and the organ covariates in terms of potential life years gained. We balance the net life years gained, so how long does the patient have to live without an organ versus how long with the organ, and the rarity of the available organ. And this is probably the key point. Sometimes it might be smart to grant an organ to a less suitable patient as their perfect order is rarer. Take the figure on the right, where the distributions of the available organs might not match the distribution of the required organs for the patients. In this case, if a patient needs a pretty rare organ, but the organ that is available better matches another patient, it might be more interesting to give it to the patient who needs a rare organ instead. So mathematically, we balance these three aspects using these two functions. The first function, lambda, multiplies the distance between the optimal organ for a patient X versus the organ that is available times the probability of the patient's most optimal organ. The higher this function gets, the more chances the patient has of receiving the available organ. We use lambda to weight an individual treatment effect. That is, we estimate the life years expected without an organ for X versus the life years expected with the organ for X. Then the person with the highest score using these functions will receive the organ. So even estimating simple life years in an organ setting is a very difficult problem. For instance, we cannot have an unbiased estimate by purely regressing on the life years given the organ and patients on the waiting list. This is because organs in the past have not been assigned randomly. There is bias in assigning organs to patients. So for this, we build a balanced representation using a gradient reversal layer to estimate the propensities and a simple fully connected layer to estimate the outcomes. Using these two objectives, we balance the representation phi to make an unbiased prediction. So there are some results. First on synthetic or semi-synthetic data, and then on real data. And using the data in the UK, we find that OrganiTE compares favorably to other assignment policies. For instance, FIFO is a simple naive policy, first in, first out. Sickest person first favors those in need of the organ the most, which is comparable to the MELD score in the US. A best match, so with respect to the life years gained given the organ. Incremental survival, which is comparable to UCALT in the UK. Confident match, which is something that was presented by this lab also a few years ago, and then OrganiTE, of course. So thank you very much.